Let's see if this is a... Oh, boy. Tranny. Yeah, it's insane. So the CMO is a freak. I mean, I don't even want to play the video. Like, he was giving this whole speech about what is it? How they want to like enable everybody to be able to transition at work and equity and inclusivity, blah 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 blah. I mean, the UK is really going in a weird direction, you know, between being light on illegal immigrants who stab people and arresting people who post about that on social media, and then Jaguar feels like they're positioning themselves better if they go in this direction rather than the traditional direction. Really makes you wonder what incentives are being pushed in the UK. Because I think the forces that are pushing this initiative are pretty similar to the forces that are pushing us into the Ukraine war. And watch this. I'm gonna do the ultimate weave right here, right now. Ready? So I've spoken about a book before called The Committee of 300, right? Like a large network of all these organizations that are layers of power that all report to the same people. So there's one group formerly called the Royal Institute for International Affairs, now called the Chatham House. Anthony Blinken was at the Chatham House just a few months ago before all this popped off, and they have a history of pushing the U.S. into wars against its will, according to the book Committee of 300 by former MI6 officer John Coleman. Margaret Thatcher was told by the RIAA, now Chatham House, to tell President Herbert Walker Bush to get his ass over to Iran, or excuse me, Iraq. So, according to this book, they pushed us into the Iraq War and many other wars. And the Tavistock Institute of Human Research was also a big part of this book. It's like the propaganda center. And earlier last year, there was actually a division. You know, I'm going to show you both these articles. There was actually a division of Tavistock shut down for gender studies. Yes, I'm going to blow your mind right now. So here's one, right? So why the Tavistock Identity Clinic was forced to shut down. What happens next? All right. So was a report in this newspaper that sparked my real interest in Gidson made me ask what's going on. In November 2018, the article by Jamie Doward revealed the Gender Identity Development Service, to use its full title, was undertaking a review. The details were scarce, but a senior member of staff had claimed that the service was failing to examine fully the psychological and social reasons behind young people's desire to change gender. In the week that Gid's 35-year history had finally ended, I have been thinking about that time, how it set the scene of what would unfold over the next few years and how things could have been so different. What if NHS England had acted when it saw a report of those concerns? It didn't, and the service remained open for another 6 years. Service which referred children for puberty blocking drugs without robust data to support that this was beneficial, and that shut down the concerns of a growing number of its own staff. Those professionals never questioned the identity of the young people they saw, nor the intensity of their distress. What they questioned was whether the NHS service they worked in was providing safe, evidence-based care for thousands of vulnerable children, or whether they might in fact be witnessing a medical scandal unfold. In February 2009, just a few months later, more details emerged in the Sunday Times, and then in the Observer, the senior staff member mentioned was Dr. David Bell, a highly respected psychiatrist and psychoanalyst. These weren't his claims and concerns per se, though he clearly shared them, but rather 10 members of the clinical staff from GIDS had gone to him with their worries about the service, about how the service was operating. NHS whistleblowers are uncommon. To have 10 from one small clinic is unheard of. I didn't know if what they were saying was true, but the claims were extremely serious. I wanted to find out more, and that started a process resulting in a series of BBC Newsnight together, and where then colleague Deborah Cohen, and later in a book chronicling this extraordinary episode in NHS history. The clinicians had sought out Bell after repeatedly raising concerns within GIDS and the wider Tavistock itself to no avail. They told him how the service was unable to cope. The number seeking its help had increased tenfold in just 5 years. There was enormous pressure to process referrals rapidly, or more bluntly, refer children onto endocrinologists who would prescribe puberty-blocking drugs. Oh my God, this is gross. This place is evil. Get the book, The Committee of 300. You know, I have it right here. I have it on me at all times. It looks like this. Blue book, fucking crazy. There's whole sections on the Tavistock, and like it mentions like 30 organizations. Let's see if that's the chart in here. And Tavistock is one of the most commonly referred to organizations in this book. It's basically the center for propaganda. Yeah. But I haven't looked into this too much, though. I found out about this a few weeks ago. It quietly happened earlier this year. I didn't find out about the Tavistock Institute like from the book until maybe 2 months ago when I started the Forbidden Book Society. Link below if you want to join. We talk about it in great detail there. But anyway, let's continue. Sometimes, though not often, this would happen just after an hour or two, staff said. Procedures for gaining consent to these potentially life-altering treatments were inadequate, and many of these children, staff explained, were vulnerable. Many were autistic. Many had been bullied in some instances after coming out as gay. Most were unhappy. These children had complicated lives and sometimes had suffered horrendous abuse or trauma. But this wasn't always explored properly before referring them for medication. In a small minority of cases, it's difficult to properly convey just how troubled these children were. Some were nonverbal, some could not read or write, others even identified as another race. The official review that followed Bell's report didn't give GIDS a clean bill of health, but the Tavistock Trust told the press that the service had been found to be safe and operating in line with the best practice of the field internationally. Oh my God, you sickos. The Trust's chief executive insisted that none of the concerns around safety or safeguarding were upheld by our medical director. This wasn't true, and the messaging underpinning the public statements was sympathetic of how the Trust was responding to the difficulties GIDS was facing. The Tavistock told this newspaper in November 2018 that it was concerned by the tone and manner in which these allegations have been made, and that they revealed a negative attitude toward gender dysphoria and gender identity. Wow. So this, like, I cannot emphasize how much sense this makes, because the purpose of this group was to like create the optimal words and the optimal way to say things to like put trends into society. So according to this book, like, they were responsible for the Beatles, they were responsible for drug use and trends and fads like within high school, like glorifying the rebellious kid, like glorifying the like rebelling against your parents. So like when I was reading about this group in the book, I'm like, you know, what they're describing here, because the book is written in the 90s, it sounds a lot like what happened or what's happening right now with the messaging around this whole gender transitioning thing. So it actually was them. So Anyway, first, continuing, for some who had contributed to Bell's report, this confirmed what they had been saying all along, that if you raised concerns, you would face accusations of transphobia. That word wasn't used in the statement, but it's how staff interpreted it. When Bell's report was leaked, the trust claimed that it presented hypothetical vignettes rather than actual case studies. This was also untrue. Some were so appalled by the statement that they resigned. Others who stayed at the trust say that it sent a message: if you spoke out, you would be vilified. When in June 2020, Newsnight broadcast parts of the transcript of official interviews clinicians had held with Tavistock's medical director as part of the review, the trust claimed didn't stand up. A sizable minority staff had in fact told him that Gid's model of care was unsafe and that some children were being harmed. At about the same time, legal proceedings against the Tavistock Trust questioned whether the children could properly consent to treatment with puberty blockers. Kira Bell, the lead claimant, was referred for drugs after just 3 or 4 appointments. She was also prescribed testosterone while under Gid's care. A double mastectomy followed via adult services, and aged 22, she regretted all of it. No alternatives have been explored by the service at the time, she said. The case was ultimately lost on appeal, but showed how over 30 years Gids had appeared to have collected no meaningful data on his patients or its core treatment pathway. It could not tell the court how many children had been referred for puberty blockers, how old they had been, what sex they were, or if they had gone on to take hormones. Change quickly followed Newsnight's broadcast and the start of litigation. In September 2020, the NHS England announced that pediatrician Dr. Hilary Cass would undertake an independent review of the gender identity services for children and young people. The Care Quality Commission, CQC, inspected Gids a month later and rated the service inadequate, and in a damning report, upheld most of the concerns clinicians had been raising for years. Contrary to the denials from the Tavistock, the CQC found examples of 2 session assessments. The trust would later concede that 1 session assessment had also occurred too. The watchdog noted that Gids did not always adequately manage risk, that consent was not recorded routinely, and that some staff felt unable to raise concerns without fear of retribution. In some cases, it said, quote, there was no clear rationale for clinical decision-making. Cass's interim review, published in February 22, marked the beginning of the end for Gids. Single specialist provider model is not safe or viable long-term option, she wrote. Fundamentally different service model was needed. 1, children with complex needs were identified as having gender-related distress. Those other important healthcare issues were sometimes overlooked, she said. There were significant gaps in the research and evidence base, and Gids' clinical approach had not been subjected to some of the usual control measures that are typically applied with new or innovative treatments are introduced. The report explained Cass was referring diplomatically to NHS England allowing Gids to routinely refer children as young as 9 for puberty blockers from 2014 onward. Oh my God. Without insisting on any robust data to support the policy. This psycho was referring 9-year-olds for puberty blockers since 2014, from 2014 to at least 2019, according to this. Oh my God. On 2022, on July 28th, 2022, the NHS England announced its intention to close Gids. It would be replaced initially by 2 non-regional services, one in London and the other in Northwest England. They would follow a very different model of care, offering more holistic treatment, a range of pathways, with the primary intervention being psychological support, not medication. NHS England confirmed on March 12 that puberty blockers would not be available going forward because there was not enough evidence to support their safety or clinical effectiveness. Blockers will not be prescribed on the NHS unless and until a research trial has been established. NHS had also updated its policy around hormones accordingly. Previously, someone could start hormones at around their 16th birthday, interpreted by GIDS staff as 15 years old and 9 months. If only they had been on blockers for 12 months beforehand. Otherwise, they would have to wait for access to adult services. NHS's new policy, largely copy and pasted from the previous one, complete with out-of-date document references, confirm hormones will now be available without the need for prior treatment with puberty blockers. A new safeguarding measure has been introduced whereby a national clinician team will have to agree the young person meets all relevant criteria for the drugs. The new policy will be reviewed from CAS's final recommendations, so may well be short-lived. The opening of the new youth gender service has been beset by delays. The aim was to have the first 2 clinics running by spring 2023. They will finally be open Monday, while third being set up in Bristol area over time. Jesus. So the reason I wanted to show that to you is because Tavistock, according to this book right here, is responsible for setting basically the national narrative, like whether it's around COVID or like around elections or around wars. Like, they're responsible for messaging around a topic to get the population on board with something. Like, they're deeply, deeply effective at propaganda. So it's crazy that they were associated with this. Next crazy thing. Watch this. So September 10th, 2024, Anthony Blinken goes to the Chatham House, which you probably haven't heard of before, but this is the real deal. Like, this might be the thing that tells America what to do. Like, higher up than the CFR, way higher up than the WEF, higher up than the Trilateral Commission. This thing is the real deal. So September 10th, Blinken goes there. United States Secretary of State Anthony Blinken visited Chatham House on Tuesday, September 10th, as part of his 2-day trip to the UK. Secretary Blinken joined Chatham House Director Browan Maddox and invited an audience to discuss Ukraine's long-term strategic success and how to bolster its capabilities militarily, economically, and diplomatically. Mr. Blinken traveled to Chatham House following his press conference with UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy at the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office in London. The event at Chatham House took place under Chatham House rule. What does that mean? Brown and Maddox said, "We were delighted to host Secretary Blinken at Chatham House. The event provided a platform for an in-depth discussion on U.S. foreign policy in Ukraine and an important moment as the war with Russia develops and as the U.S. presidential election campaign gets into full swing. Our thanks to Secretary of State for his time and insights." So it doesn't tell us what they spoke about. All right, let me see if I could get some goodies for you here. All right, so I put in ChatGPT, what does John Coleman say about the RIA? Because that's what the Chatham House used to be. Dr. John Coleman, a former intelligence officer, has extensively discussed the Royal Institute of International Affairs in his writings, particularly his book, Conspirators Hierarchy, The Story of the Committee of 300. Got it right here. If you want to know more about it, join the Forbidden Book Society in the link below. He asserts that the RIA, also known as the Chatham House, serves as a front organization for the Committee of 300, a group he alleges exerts significant influence over global affairs. Coleman claims the RIA issues directives through other entities, such as the Tavistock Institute, which in turn established organizations like the Club of Rome and NATO. He suggests these interconnected bodies work collectively to control political, economic, and social developments worldwide. I don't know if it's true or not, but he's a former intelligence officer. So let's see let me see how crazy this thing could get. Where'd my ChatGPT go? Did this group push U.S. into wars? John Coleman in his writings. Oh, here we go. Here we go. John Coleman in his writings, particularly the Committee of 300, claims entities like the RIIA/Chatham House influenced U.S. foreign policy decisions, including involvement in wars. According to Coleman, these groups function as part of a larger network. Yep, we got that. Alleged influence on U.S. world wars. Coleman argues the RIIA played a role in maneuvering the U.S. into both World War I and World War II by influencing policymakers and leveraging propaganda to align the public sentiment with interventionist policies. Sound familiar? The Vietnam War. He suggests the organizations tied to the Chatham House helped escalate U.S. involvement in Vietnam War by fostering the Cold War narrative and pushing for the containment of communism, which benefited global elites. Middle Eastern conflicts. Coleman links the RIIA/Chatham House and related groups to U.S. engagements in the Middle East, asserting that these wars served broader geopolitical goals, such as securing energy resources and maintaining control over strategic regions. General mechanisms. He claims the Chatham House and similar bodies use think tanks, media influence, and covert operations to guide U.S. policymakers into actions that align with global elites' agenda, often at the expense of national sovereignty and public interests. Covert operations. You mean like blowing up a pipeline and making European energy prices go up by 200%? Critical perspective. Let's see what ChatGPT's critical perspective is. While Coleman's theories have gained attention in conspiracy and alternate research circles, they remain controversial and are not widely accepted by mainstream historians or political scientists. Well, let's just end what we're saying right there, because totally trust those people. Critics argue that his claims often lack concrete evidence and overstate the influence of specific groups. Nonetheless, his work resonates with those skeptical of centralized power and its role in shaping global events. So, just briefly, his sources, he sources the shit out of everything. I mean, order this book, join the Forbidden Book Society, decide for yourself, but he cites the hell out of everything. Like in the old-fashioned way too. I really like it. Like, instead of putting all those sources at the back of the book, he puts like each source under each piece of information. And he says that he did 30 years of research to write this book in the British Museum, which is he calls the finest repository of information in the world, because there was a time where the sun never set in the United Kingdom, so like they just harvested all the information from all the libraries or archives from every country that they pillaged and invaded. All right, so guys, that took a turn. That was fun though. Let me know what you think in the comment section. That got a little crazy, but so much shit to talk about. I think that people that we don't even know about are making things happen right now, whether it's this crazy LGBT stuff, trans bathrooms and everything, or us provoking Russia to use nuclear weapons. I think that there's bigger forces at play behind all of it, and that is what we talk about here, because we don't like to be sheep. At least I don't. I don't know about you, but I don't like to strongly believe in something that ends up being completely wrong, that somebody manipulated me into believing in. That pisses me off more than anything. So if you don't want to be in that position either, you're in the right place, and check out the Forbidden Book Society, because we put all of that front and center. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys, and I will see you later. Peace. Oh, and follow me on X.